is here and welcome to another video. Today we're doing another video inside of Hermitcraft, Season Clockwork. We are reading episode 56, chapter 9. We'll see if we can get to chapter 10, depending on how long these chapters are. Some of them are longer than others, but yeah, we'll see. Yeah. Why don't we get into it? Yes, perspective is once again Tango, as you can tell from the title of the video. Yeah. You know the truth. If you don't want to be spoiled, go back to watch the other episodes and come back here. I mean, that's your choice. It is your choice. Chapter 9. Tango stood in front of the window, unable to sleep as he looked out into the dark night. Beyond the trees, the trees rustled briskly against the wind, faintly reaching the hermit's ears as he looked out into the moon-kissed night. It looked somewhat dark and ominous, with the only lights coming from the moon and some torches that were scattered around the area. An entire day had passed, and they had found nothing. The men had seemed to have disappeared completely with his friend. They disappeared shortly after he'd helped B-Dubs and hadn't attempted to attack any of his fellow hermits. That didn't mean much, though, even looking up at the stars above, wondering where in the world his friend was. His thoughts were interrupted when he heard footsteps down the hallway. As he looked over his shoulder to notice he'd left the door open. Should he go close it? Would whoever was patrolling the hall notice? He wasn't sure what to do as he looked back at the window again. Hearing the footsteps grew louder before they stopped. "I'm surprised you're still awake," Blake's voice said from behind as he heard the young man approach. "I couldn't sleep," Tango admitted quietly before looking over at the new arrival standing beside him. "So Matthias told you to come?" "He wanted some backup tonight." Blake shrugged. "I am planning on going out tomorrow to help look for Impulse." Tango nodded his head slowly. "Do you think they'll let you do that after what happened?" "They can't stop me from trying," the man chuckled before looking out the window as well. "I don't blame you for not being able to sleep. I want him back. He saves just as much as you do." Tango managed a smile. "I mean, it is your job." "Fair," the man chuckled. "Still, I heard of a story of two brothers venturing across the world to try to help one of their friends, someone they cared about, even despite everything else that had happened. They never stopped looking until they found it." "Did they?" Tango was curious. "Yeah, they did," the young man smiled. "It changed everything, inspired a lot of people, gave hope to those who were struggling to find it." "I think I know where you're trying to get at," the hermit said softly. "I know you got it, and you do." "Really think so?" the god member asked in surprise. "You may still be young, but I never doubted you," Tango replied. "Impulse never doubted you. He trusts you with his life. We need more people like you." Blake nodded and smiled again. "Maybe that's why Liam asked me to help. He knew I could." "He wasn't wrong," Tango replied with a nod. "Yeah." Blake sighed as they stood there for a moment. Tango wasn't sure what more he wanted to say to the cause member. He looked back towards the window as a feeling of dread washed over him. He swallowed, tightening his grip on the windowsill. "Everything okay?" "Something's happening," Tango whispered after a moment's hesitation. Blake nodded, put a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "I'll find him." Tango nodded his head at his side, dipping over at the escort sadly. "I know that. I'm not sure he knows." A few moments passed before the feeling faded away as they looked up at the window once again, spotting the moon, half full, ever so slowly crossing the night sky. He wasn't sure how long the two of them stood there, but the moment was gone far shorter than Tango really wanted it to. "If you're up for it, I'd try to get some sleep," Blake suggested calmly. "We won't be far if you need anything." "I'll try," Gibber agreed, watching as the cause member wished him a good night and walked back through the door and into the hallway, partly closing the door behind him, giving him a little more privacy. He sighed as he pushed himself away from the window, pulling back the covers of the bed before crawling again, wondering whether or not the men even thought to give his friend a bed, or if he'd been forced to sleep on the floor like last time. Whatever it was, there would be a bed open for his friend when he returned. The thought passed his mind. He drifted off to sleep, remembering nothing more of the night. Episode 57. Chapter 10. This will probably mean it will be left off in a cliffhanger. Sorry. Chapter 10. I'm going to warn you now. Tango was outside with beat-ups. Another few days having passed since the attacks had occurred. He'd tinkered on a little redstone contraption he was working on. Not sure what exactly what he was doing, yet he knew he needed to do something, to make something. Hopefully it would bring them one step closer to finding their friend. Can you pull that lever over there for me? Tango asked as he gestured toward the lever nearby. The other hermit, as he stepped back from the machine, beat-ups didn't hesitate as he went for the lever and pulled it as the machine came to life, whirring and making a little noise as the hermit examined it. Seems like it's working, right? Beat-ups questioned curiously. Pretty still. Something is working, that's for sure. Tango nodded as he went over to the lever and pulled it back as the machine died down. Went back towards it and readjusted some things until he was satisfied, stepping back to admire his work. Still not sure what this is for? Beat-ups pondered. Yeah, just a little thing we did, I guess, Tango replied. And if all else fails, we can create a TNT cannon and blow up one of their bases. Beat-ups chuckled. Yes, I would show them. He had a day Friday. You don't really want to do that, though. I don't, Tango denied. Not until I know Impulse isn't their prisoner, because if we retaliate, they will bite back, and it won't be pretty. Definitely not. Beat-ups agreed, as he looked over at the machine again, before looking up at his friend. I mean, we could make a noisemaker to annoy them. Tango snorted. Yeah, that totally will go well. You never know. Maybe if we treat them like one of us, they won't be so mean. Beat-ups shrugged. Before he himself started laughing. Maybe. Tango mused as he glanced back towards the gem space, wondering where everyone else had gone. Green had to be still inside somewhere. Gem, Pearl, and Blake had gone off to help look for Impulse. Besides had to be nearby as well. It's pretty calm out here. Still calm. Do you hear that? Hear what? Beat-ups asked quizzically, tilting his head as he tried to listen. I didn't hear anything. Exactly. Tango replied warily, turning towards the woods, squinting as he tried to peer into the trees. It seemed barely dense. There were no signs of life that you could see. No foxes chasing tiny rabbits. No bees buzzing through the trees. No sound of sheep, cows, or chickens in the slightest. In fact, it seemed as if they'd all fled. Silence seemed to draw on forever before he heard the snap of a twig somewhere in the distance, though it sounded more like something snapping a log in half than a twig. Tango took a step back towards the house as he started to see a shadow in the trees. It was large and cylinder, a familiar shape, yet it looked smaller than he remembered. And he shuddered, seeing a red glow, as he shouted for Beat-ups to duck and threw himself to the ground. As the red beam shot through the woods, hitting the contraption behind him, and it exploded as Tango gasped in surprise, still hearing the ring of the explosion in his ears as he groaned, looking over to see Beat-ups just as he too got to his feet. Then they finally saw the thing come to the light as Tango watched it slow down as it moved its head side to side, tracking them. Do we move? Beat-ups asked in a hushed whisper. Not yet. Tango whispered back quietly. He eyed the machine before it finally chose its target. It stared right at him. Run! The two hermits bolted on the opposite sides of the machine as he heard the machine stomping after him. Yelping in surprise as he dodged another beam of light, something flew from overhead. Tango stumbled back, getting to his feet as he looked up at the machine, looming over him. Somehow, the machine managed to rip a part of the base out and block his escape. He was cornered. He knew it. Tango! A voice shouted as Tango watched the machine as the machine lifted its claws, snapping them once or twice, as if taunting him. Tango took a wary step back as he watched as one of the claws began to approach him, preparing to bolt at the last possible moment. Before he could do so, he was shoved aside, just to hear a gasp as he looked up to see the machine had grabbed his rescuer. Now struggling frantically in its grasp, he realized pretty quickly it wasn't B-Dubs. His eyes widened in horror. Impulse! Tango shouted as he scrambled to his feet and tried to lunge at the machine, only to be shoved aside by the machine's other arm, and he heard a cry of pain. Let him go, you monster! The machine seemed to ignore him as it focused on its new target. Tango could see his friend looking pretty pale, tired already. His attempts to free himself growing weaker and weaker as Tango got to his feet again, as a single eye began to glow. Why don't you mess with someone your own size? B-Dub's voice hollered from behind the machine as he launched himself onto the machine's back, to its head, managing to swerve it towards the trees just in time as the beam blasted the woods, catching one of the trees on fire. B-Dubs, be careful! Tango shouted as he ran towards the machine with his axe in hand, as he leapt up to the arm holding the other hermit. I'm holding on! B-Dubs hollered. I'll be fine! Tango said nothing for a moment as he tried to hack at the arm again before the machine moved. As it backed up, trying to get the hermit on top of him off, and as he could hear his other friends gasp with pain, the machine tightened its grip. Suddenly, the machine jolted backwards, unexpectedly, as B-Dubs went flying back, landing on the ground with a groan as the machine turned to face him. Get out of there! Tango shuddered and B-Dubs stumbled to his feet and began to try to get away from the machine as it began to walk towards him, the earth shaking beneath them. His friend stumbled. Leave my friends alone, a voice said from behind as Tango saw an arrow fly over his head and strike the middle of the machine as it stopped its pursuit. He glanced over his shoulder to see Grian holding his bow and arrow, with an arrow nocked and at the ready. See his friend shaking slightly, holding the ground. The machine turned to face them as Tango swallowed, taking a step back as a single eye began to glow, seeing that Impulse's pulse had now grown limp in the machine's grasp. As Tango watched, Grian shot the arrow as it struck, right at the center of the machine's eye, as its eye smashed as it flew backwards by its own force, flinging its arms out as its claws released. He saw his friend be flung into the air. Impulse! Tango shouted in alarm. He charged forward, watching as his friend hit the ground, rolled a couple times before lying face up on his back. Closed as he ran up to his friend, kneeling down next to him, as he grabbed one of his friend's shoulders and shook him gently. Come on, please wake up. He heard a groan as he turned to a pain cough as he saw his friend's dark brown eyes open to meet his own red ones, yet they seemed distant and confused. As he tried to sit up, only fell back down, gasping with pain. Yes? He's not here, but he's okay, Tango whispered gently as he went to grab his medical box, seeing the expression of confusion when he noticed the headband tightly bound to the hermit's forehead. You sure? An Impulse's quiet voice asked. The whisper seemed hoarse, as if he'd been screaming for hours. That thing can't hurt any of us now, Tango insisted, waiting until the hermit nodded. He's... Impulse tried before coughing again, reaching up to touch the band. He's still... Who? Tango asked calmly. Skis? No. Impulse tried, before he gasped in pain again, his hands automatically grabbing at the headband. His tears formed in his eyes. Make him stop. Please. Tango? We've got company. Grian's voice warned, redirecting him as Tango looked up to see that the hermit had come to see what was going on. You could see his expression was stern as he followed his gaze to see a few figures approaching, as well as spotting B-Dubs stumbling towards them. The figures appeared in the light. Dread crept through him as he slowly got to his feet, taking back out his axe. He heard his friend's cries, faint, heavy breathing. He recognized one of the men immediately. Joe said, realizing none of them were Mr. A's men, walking with authority and purpose. Seeing the man, Gerald, holding the control panel, headband. Thing that was tormenting his friend. Thing that had caused so much pain to so many already. Many more if they didn't do something about it. We can continue. Cliffhanger. Yeah. Chapter 11. Let my friend go, Tango warned as the man approached, raising his axe a little. That's not the right word I'm looking for. There we go. A little higher as Beatles managed to reach them, trying his best to stand straight, even though it was evident he was in some pain. Is that how you greet your guests? One of the men asked. It seemed to be the one in charge. We're the ones in control here. You'll do what we say, as we say. Or what? Beat-Up demanded simply. The man pointed over at Gerald, who lifted the control panel slightly. He noticed Green tense. Tango looked over at his friend. Pardon me, I'm afraid we haven't properly introduced ourselves yet, the man said brightly, readjusting the leather jacket as he added. Unless Green would care to do the honors for us. Green lifted his chin as he spoke. Why are you here, Mr. A? Why do you think I'm here? I get my men the tasks to help me fulfill what I want. What do I get? I get resistance. Still, managed to make do, as you can see. Tango glanced over at his shoulder warily, beating his friend's tear-filled eyes. His friend was experiencing physical and mental pain, barely holding on as he heard his friends whisper something that he couldn't quite catch. As he looked back at the men. You're still in our world, Beatles replied simply. We still have an advantage. Do you? The man asked quizzically as he raised an eyebrow. It took me finding you before you even found your friend. If you really knew your way around, you wouldn't be in this situation right now. You're the one putting him in this situation, Green said firmly, as he pulled out his bow, carefully placing an arrow as he touched the string. Besides, I'm sure you're smarter than that to just keep prisoners in the obvious places. He's got that right, at least, Sickman chuckled. Still, you have to remember, the moment you attack us, we can and will hurt your friend. Maybe finish him off if you feel like it. Tango touched as he clenched the hilt of his axe tightly. What do you want? It's pretty simple, Billy, Mr. A said with a shrug. Come to us willingly, when your fits might not be so brutal, or perhaps less painful. I think I'll pass on that, Peter's replied simply. Are you sure you want to go there? Mr. A warned as Tango watched Gerald touch a few buttons, turn a few dials, as he heard a sob of pain from behind as he narrowed his eyes. We need to get that controller, Green told him quietly. How? Tango asked as he turned his attention to his friend. As soon as we do anything they don't like, they'll kill him. What? That doesn't make sense. I mean, I said it makes sense. There we go. Green hesitated for a moment. He over at the men warily. Tango looking back, noticing some figures behind the tree. What are you two discussing? The man asked curiously. About how we're going to stop you, Tango said determinedly. You can't, Gerald chuckled. Not when we hold all the power. Yet, are we cowering in fear? From what I can tell. No, we aren't, he said determinedly. We're not afraid of you. Your tactics don't work here. You're really testing my patience, Mr. A warned. Before anyone could say any more, Tango watched and noticed one of the figures behind him and lunge at Gerald as he lost his grip on the controller as it flew into the air as Peter lunged forward to grab it before it hit the ground. As the small crowd of hermits and escorts came forward to the rescue. How do you turn this thing off? Beat-Ups asked as he looked down at the panel. Let me see. Tango offered as Beat-Ups ran over and handed it to him. He looked at it for a moment before turning a dial or two and a few buttons. Hearing his friend's pain sobs die down, he pocketed the device, kneeling down at his friend. Watch my back. Count on it, Beat-Ups said eagerly as Tango nodded, reaching down to unclasp the headband as he noticed his friend wince before realizing that there was no pain. Is it? Impulse asked as Tango quietly pocketed the headband. It can't hurt you anymore, Tango reassured him as he grabbed his medical box once again and pulled out a regeneration potion, taking out a towel as he doused it with the potion, laying it gently on his friend's chest. Better? Yeah. Impulse groaned, readjusting his eyes up to the sky, blinking a few times before he added, Is this real? Well, that's a mess, Tango admitted. If you mean the fact that we're here and there's currently a battle not too far, yeah, it's real. Phil's managed to bait smile as he looked over at him for a moment. Where did you come from? I was always here, Tango chuckled. I think it really messed with me. Phil sighed as he tried to sit up again, groaning as he fell back down. You really need to learn not to do that after being nearly crushed but to death, Tango mused. You're okay? Impulse asked quietly. Everyone's okay, Tango said reassuringly. Nothing we can't handle as a team. The hermit nodded as he let out a sigh, his eyes growing heavy. Generation potion did its magic. Tango waited calmly as his friend finally drifted off, seeing a peaceful expression on his face. He smiled as he heard footsteps approach him. As he looked up to see Blake coming next to him. Looks like you managed to sort that out, Blake said calmly, examining the hermit. Physically, yeah, Tango nodded. I have a feeling he's going to have a few nightmares every once in a while. Blake nodded. Doesn't surprise me. He's been having them quite often. What do you think I'm aware of? Tango chuckled. He'll be okay? Given time, yeah, Blake said with a smile. Why don't we give him a side? Tango nodded as he gently reached down to his friend, scooping him up as he got to his feet, glancing over his shoulder to see that 3 men had gone. They must have given up as soon as they realized that they were outnumbered. He could see a few of his friends standing around the yard, chatting, as he followed Blake towards the house, knowing that they had a long way to go yet before anything would be able to go back to normal. Unfortunately, that's going to be the end of this episode. I hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Chapter 12, which is coming soon. Bye.